Oh, welcome everyone to another week of the creating and monitoring functional landscapes. Um, Currently up on the Sunshine Coast to sort of try and write some drought reports. Um, I'd like to acknowledge the Gunai Kurnai and the Palawakani people from where the farm is in southeast Gippsland, in eastern Gippsland, and also in Tasmania. Um, and sort of the we were very lucky for them to have worked out how to leave the land in such great condition for agriculture, open grassland and stuff. So the won't spend any time. I'll just skip these slides just so that you remember them though. So land, people and profit nested in increasing biodiversity and landscape function. Landscape function is about soil surface science. So it's about how do you change that to change the outcome. Yeah. A lot of people are doing things like covers and all that sort of stuff, but they're not changing the soil surface. They still either graze it all off or whatever. If you don't change the soil surface, increase the amount of ground cover, the litter cover, the decomposition of the litter, and ideally include perennial grasses. It makes it very hard to make the land stable, infiltrate water and cycle nutrients at the level we need. And there's really clear relationship between how we apply the animals through grazing and the outcome on the land. And I think it's really jumping out and interesting what you were saying, Kirsten, about people and what we see a lot of that, and then sort of struggling. I'm trying not to say, that they're stuffing up during the drought. If you listen to the advice, there is no way you could make it work. So um, I've got this idea that you could offer people $1 million to increase their landscape function. There's no way they could do it unless they spend enough time thinking about it and doing this and focusing on profit, not on production. So, and I'll keep coming back to that. Um, to do this, Celia asked why I had this as number one and a half to two full-time equivalents. If you've got to work 5 7 days a week and move the animals, so this is for rapid landscape function increase, regeneration of the land, then you actually need someone to do the weekends or to give you a break. It's a bit like being a dairy farmer. It's like 7 days a week and it gets a bit much. I used to be able to do it easier, but as I get older, I find that you actually need weekends and stuff and holidays and things. So that was why, if you can't cover that off somehow, um, you either have to back off to once a day moves, which I think is the minimum, or um, or I wouldn't start. I used to do this thing that if you're not prepared to have the people put the infrastructure in, change your cattle type, learn how to monitor, do all that, I wouldn't start. Because I said it's more than likely going to break your heart, is what I used to say. And then I'd do that thing that I do that I'd say, I hope I'm not overselling the grazing management because everyone else was doing the grazing management training and then saying, just put them together, it'll all be good. And I was saying, don't start, it'll break your heart. So, um, so yeah, safe to fail trials, we all know what they are. You need to determine what your land needs in terms of recovery, stock density, and utilisation. I think you need more than 200 paddocks. I've never seen anyone successful. I reckon it's closer. The minimum, I think, is 365 paddocks per mob would work really nicely and give you enough flexibility and capacity to handle dry feed, lower rainfalls, all the combination of things. I'd use strip fencing because you just can't subdivide conventional fences. Some people do, like the Coglins at Holbrook and Narandra, they have conventionally fenced paddocks for their 2,000 cows in a mob, and at Holbrook and 2,500 cows in a mob at Narandra. So, excuse me, they have conventionally fenced. Some of them feed into the one dam or ground tank, where they use sort of like that really big irrigation pipe and a pump to keep the water up to that mob in summer. So it's a lot of water. Some have, they have flow through, coffin troughs that they just have passing through, and the animals relax because the water's going past. So some drink from that, and some drink from the dam. So, but they don't do lots of little subdivisions. It's just 4 paddocks from that one dam centre, if you like. They don't use electric fencing because they just don't have enough time to do that on both properties and stuff. It's high maintenance, but it's lower cost. So, maybe in the future you look at it. But keeping the water near the animals is really important. I find that ours knock up pretty quick, and they get used to not having to walk. So, Sookie Southern Cattle, as the cattle people from Queensland used to say when they used to come down. And then you've got to breed because they don't make them. So you've really got to be a breeder, as far as I can see, unless you've got someone nearby that you can buy their animals off that are already doing this management. Then you possibly could be a trader. The problem with that, and I'll talk about it a bit later, is that it limits the number of exit points that you've got. To handle variation in rainfall, you've got to be able to get out of the animals at a profit at a lot of different stages. And if you're a trader, it tends to be that you've got to wait till you finish them to get your money back out of them. So, and we've been doing a lot of that, Celia and I have been doing a lot of that discussion and working with people over the last week for the drought report. Any questions on that? Was that all pretty solid sort of stuff, understood, said before? I'll just do an update on where we're up to. So this was last year's rainfall, because I've been doing this for everyone else, and it's like the builder or the plumber or the electrician never finishing their own. So this was what happened last year. So we were wet all through this period, and we had heaps of grass. And then all of a sudden, it started to dry off from about March onwards. And then July, August, and September were looking pretty dire. But then we were lucky and different from southwest Victoria and Western Victoria, in that then we had a big front just came in straight in through the northwest and straight through us, which normally doesn't happen. But it wasn't very wide. It was like a strip right across Australia of rain, and it got us. So typically those ones coming in from the northwest get turned away by the Great Dividing Range and all that. But this didn't happen. We had record October, record November, record December. But then it sort of has been mucking around a bit, which is happening in Tasmania, everywhere I look in Tasmania. But yeah, so we've been talking about what's the themes that we're seeing about this, that people that are drought resilient have recoveries sort of maybe not as long as what I'm talking about, but like the Coghlan 6 months. And it allows them to skip over a few of these things and adjust their numbers in time to not do much damage. So what I've tried to do on this next one, and I found it really hard to line up I cropped the rainfall figures and did all that sort of stuff, was just line them up so the rainfall with how our recovery was going. So we started with plenty of grass, like the living was easy. We sort of got it back to 12 months recovery, and it was all going very well. Stopped raining sort of that June, July. We started to get more animals in, brought more animals in, and then they started calving early, which was a bit of a nightmare. I was expecting them in September, and they started calving in August, some of the cows we'd bought in. and they were really hard to fill up. They were really big cows with a lot high maintenance energy. You couldn't push them very hard. There were a lot of them were on their first calf, even though I think some of them were 3-year-olds. And it was just hard work. What kicked in then also was that some of the bulls that we picked, we were pulling probably 1 in 3, 1 in 5 of those calves. So it went from sort of the living was easy into some sort of nightmare. And I actually got that tired, sort of working and pulling calves and doing that, that I lost the ability to think and make decisions. It was getting up, going, checking the cows, going and setting the yards up, pulling another calf. It was like that sort of stuff. It was just um, living that relaxed rural lifestyle that I've been talking to people about with high well-being scores. So it was just not going so well. What we did was we took some action here. I sold 25 weaners. We basically gave them away. They went to another person's meat business that does sort of like an organic-y grass-fed meat business. Jared gave me another paddock that I then put the empty cows in that weren't going to calve. So this was this October 23 time. So that was about all we did, and then it started raining. So it got down to, really short recovery. It was starting to look like we were going to really mess it up, but then it started raining. So if it hadn't started raining, that would have been a bit of a disaster here. So it wasn't the most systematic way of managing, I keep saying to people. So we got record October, record November, and record December. And I just thought, and then average January, low Feb, low March. And so we recovered all that. Those cows got more robust, and once they'd mothered up and doing all that sort of stuff. And then, we were going through some rough country here and stuff, but not too worried about it. May was low, and then June's been, good again. So we're still sort of bouncing around. Last week, as everyone knows, sold about another 28 empty cows, weaned the calves, preg tested, got rid of everything that we could. So I need to update these figures because I haven't got like that June, July. But do people get the sense of that, how that sort of all played out? It wasn't the only thing that got us through, and we've seen this repeatedly through the drought project, was that we had slack in the system. We had a buffer of recovery to draw down on. If we hadn't had that, this would have been an absolute disaster, this August, September period. But we still had ground cover. I actually think that because a lot of it was native grasses as well, I know that if it hadn't rained July, August, September, and it had been on Phalaris and some of those introduced grasses, they don't have much feed value when they do get rain, whereas a lot of the weeping grass and paspalum and a few of the others that we've got, they all came back really strongly. So so it sort of like dragged us through there. But now just we've got rid of a lot of the ones that I had to nurse through because they were unadapted cows with too much maintenance energy. I was having to move everyone to fill up those bottom ones and make sure that you didn't let them run down too low. And it was stressful. So so just sort of, but this is almost a pattern of the rainfall for the northwest, the northeast of Tassie, the Midlands, and even down into sort of the Huon Valley and stuff. So and Eastern Gippsland, Southwest Victoria didn't get these rains, so that's why they're on their lowest ever. So Terang and Hamilton, like dairy areas, are on their lowest rainfall ever. So, which is really July to July. Yeah, so it's really sort of quite belted into them. Any questions, comments? Can you see the value of that? Have I made that clear, that idea of recovery being the inefficiency or the buffer or the safety valve to give you time to do these, even though I've said here it was all too little too late.
So what was the process for you to get out of those cattle as profitably as possible?
Yeah, well, that's what was stopping me around here when I seized up, sort of. Um, the majority of them were Jared's cattle. So Jared owns it, and I'm sort of share farming with Jared on Wattle Park. He paid $2,000 plus for a lot of those heifers that we joined, and now they were worth, at that time, they were worth sort of $500. And
Ooh.
I found that really hard, but it would have been all right if they'd been mine. But I felt like I'd let him down, and there was a whole heap of stuff going on, so um and really I just couldn't think, so yeah, so what we did was the ones that we've sold just now, so we Jared gave me an extra paddock so that he took his sheep out of. And then if we've got enough weaners, enough heifers that we want to keep of the lot we've just weaned, we're going to get some more land and stuff. And sort of the idea is to reduce the sheep and increase the cows, but sort of we're going to make more money out of it, get sort of more robust ones. So yeah, so just kept them. The ones that were fat made $1,400 last week. The ones that were skinny, off that were just being weaned off their calves and things like that, they were $600 and sort of had a few in between. So well, at least some of those ones we got a calf out of them, but like I'm not sure the calf's worth $1,400 to make it up to the 2,000. That's before you make any money. And some of the other empties have gone into the meat business, so um, that we've fattened. Is that okay? All righty. Any comments, questions before I go on? The forecast for us is pretty good. Not so good down southern Tassie or the northwest, but yeah, we're here, so we're pretty good. Wetter up there. The accuracy's pretty good. I've probably led people a bit astray on the accuracy. They've updated it the other day. I said they still had the 2014 date on. It was almost like they heard me and updated it on the 4th of July. But there's also the accuracy depending on what the forecast is. So over here, I've clicked on here. They're forecasting median rainfall. What is the accuracy on median rainfall? And if you click unusually dry, it changes the color. So for Southwest Victoria, if they forecast unusually dry, you could sort of bet your farm on it, really, that it's going to be unusually dry in these type of areas, this darker green. I would never bet against that. I've never seen the point in betting against like even a 55 to 65. If you're at the casino, you'd never do it. All you do would be, you might be cautious about how you did it, but over 55%, like more often than not, that's what's going to happen or something similar. So last year, when they forecast that El Nino in June, it was looking like it was going to be a thumper. So June was low, July, August, September for us. It just rained then, but really if you missed that fluky rainfalls, you were in quite a serious drought for southern Australia. So there's, yeah, it's like a desert over in southwest Victoria and parts of Tasmania and stuff. So anyway, those usually dry means that, you know, you can be guaranteed that it's going to be drier in these areas and stuff. So, and it's, if it's a median forecast, then it's less. So they're updating that accuracy to make it more usable. But I think we should just use it. I've never, if I followed it, I've never lost if I've followed it. I either sold animals and made money and ended up with more grass, or, you know, I never, if I followed it, I never had to feed and it never cost me money. I either ended up with more animals or more grass. It just, I would follow it. I just don't understand. But I think my forecasting little predicty tool thing that I developed, like most things I do, I develop them and never go back to them. It needs a bit more thought, because using it for the ramp group last night, I just punched in, you know, the 100 cows, 85 weaners. I gave them a fair bit because I want them to put on weight, a fair DSE, high DSE rating. Yell out if none of this, I'm not using dry sheep equivalent rating. So this was the current stocking rate, is 9.4. I used to carry 10 pretty consistently in southwest Victoria. Gippsland grows about 2/3 of the grass. East Gippsland, where I am, grows about 2/3 to half the grass that southwest Victoria used to grow. And then I said the landscape function was 4. I've knocked it about a bit, just by sort of shortening the recovery and all that. The soil moisture, it's about 4. It's not wet, but it's not dry either. And the seasonal outlook is averaged a little bit better than average. So I get trying to just get this idea that what's happening today impacts what you're going to do. And then I'm saying multiply, if score greater than 9, multiply by 0.67. And that was just fiddling. It's not based on research. It's not based on anything except my experience. So be very, very careful using it. If you want to use it, you're welcome to, but you need to know it's only based. So what it's saying is that I should reduce down to 4.7 DSE per hectare, which would mean selling half of the animals that we've got. And I go, what? Yeah. So what I was thinking I'd do is just sort of have to think more about this. And then Jared was a bit shocked last night as well. So I'm thinking I'm going to just watch this, but I've got that recovery to manage. So I'm going to manage it on that recovery, and that recovery, number of days recovery done on a regular basis, will pick up early that I should have moved quicker on this. And as soon as that happens, I'll move quicker on it. You know, cows and stuff are up at the moment. So we've got, you know, we've got weaner steers that could go. We've got a few things that could go. So, but you need things that you can sell. So prior, and this is about the most accurate month for us down here. Is that July or August, the two most accurate months on what's going to happen, and they'd line up really well with our peak of growth in spring. So if you don't get a spring, you're playing catch up for the summer and then into the autumn and stuff. So how's that? All right, any questions? Got it. I'll just play this. This is from Caroline, who's on the ramp group.
We're doing some trials on locking up paddocks for a year. But then just before the cattle went into this paddock, because it's ryegrass dominant, we spread multi-species with a super spreader before the cattle went in. And this is it's exciting, I think.
Yeah, I think that was a good outcome. So what Caroline did, she did 2 trials. So this is an area that was sort of not going so well. So she's going to give it 12 months recovery, but she grazed it really heavy. But before she grazed this one, she broadcast broadleafs, like a cover crop sort of mix. And she's really happy with the strike that she's got in that. And it's just starting to grow back. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And she's very dry there, but that's one of her not so good paddocks. And compared to her neighbours, which are down to the dirt, she's sort of fine-tuning paddocks with ground cover. You know, it's a different world and because she's got that recovery that she's used as a buffer. She's fed a little bit of hay to hold them up. She's got more than one mob, and she's fed a little bit of hay to hold some of the mobs up and all that sort of stuff. So it's going really well, you know. So luckily that we got the drought project just in time for the weather to cooperate in Tasmania and southern Victoria, so that we got real life experience of droughts. So it was good timing, I thought, on the Drought Hub's behalf. So
Graham, did she she had the cattle, did you say she grazed it really hard and then broadcast the seed?
broadcast then graze.
Broadcast and then graze. So they the cattle trampled it all in and
Yeah, and she they tried to do a sown one, but what happened was there was so much litter in it that which I think is a fantastic thing. There was so much litter that it's sort of like islands of the summer crop, because it all got balled up. So there'd either be a heap where it all got stuck in the litter and then it'd fall off the machine, and yeah, so it wasn't very pretty. So anyway, but a good result. There's usually pasture cropping really struggles in the southern areas because typically you've got to find, so what Colin Syce is doing at Gulgong, he's got summer growing grasses, C4 summer growing grasses. When they're dormant, he puts in his C3 multi-species cover crop mix. So they're not competing at the same growing time. So these are gone dormant from overgrazing, frosting, and desiccant herbicide. So he actually belts them hard to shut them down. Because even when perennial grasses are dormant, they still control the nitrogen, they still control the nutrient and water flow. They hate annuals if you give them a chance, perennial grasses. I think they're fantastic. So when I'm talking to big groups of men, I'll say they've got the football. You've got to get the football off them to get your other cereals in there. So it takes a lot of banging them around. Cole used to use paraquat and things like that. So he said it's a fantastic chemical. It doesn't kill grasses, it just kills people, was one of his sort of throwaway funny lines, half funny line. And yeah, so he's shifted to Basdura, which is slightly less toxic. So small amounts of that. He then puts in a little bit of nitrogen fertilizer to help start the cereals, because even though they've been belted, the healthy perennials control the nitrogen flow. So you've got to give them a bit of hand with a little bit of tilt. So he uses a knife point, not a disc, because the disc doesn't give enough tilt or disturbance. So if you wanted to know more about that, but it's very hard to reproduce that down south where you've got dominant winter growing grasses and you're trying to put in a summer growing cover crop. So more your corns, your sorghums, your millets, those sort of type of plants. Because what happens is that if it does rain, the C3 grasses wake up anyway. You know, whereas if it rains in Collins in winter, the C4 grasses just stay dormant because they don't have the temperature. So, you know, where C3 grasses just like to grow. So, have a much wider temperature band to grow those winter grasses. So yeah, but if you wanted, I don't know how well I did that, but it's just hard to do down south. So that might be a way of just doing it. So it'd be interesting to see whether the grasses take out that. I thought I had to clip this in. It was in the MLA magazine. Beef producers prioritizing productivity over profitability. It's like that's like my whole story. It's like I go, oh, they must have been reading my mail. So, and they're talking about during this survey that people are feeding these animals even though they don't have any feed. So then they just to get their finish weights over profit. So they can actually see it in the data. But like there is no advice that I see anywhere from all the conventional agronomists, from everyone, that doesn't prioritize productivity over profitability. It's just ridiculous. Even my fellow cell grazing, planned grazing trainers do exactly the same thing. They tell you you'll be able to carry twice as many animals. Alan will say 400%. Alan Savory. Everyone. I used to say it was linked to there was a chromosome on the Y. There was something on the Y chromosome, a gene on the Y chromosome that linked us to productivity. That it was all a male thing, but it's actually I see it in the women agronomists as well. It's just we think that everything has to increase. We've got to increase productivity, and it's wrong. We've got to go back the other way and actually start doing it differently. I just threw this in just for something to discuss. I've got a theory that if you select bulls for fleshing ability, which this one has, eventually you start to lose his muscle. And I was just putting him up as a bull that I think that eventually that he'll start to get his progeny will have less and less muscle than what he did. And they'll blame something else rather than they were selecting for fat. If you select bulls for fat, you select for less muscle and less testosterone. And I think we've also, there was a big push when the European cattle came in that the heifers could sell for the same level as the males. So the steers and the heifers would sell for the same amount of money. It used to be a selling point for European bulls. And I think that that's what's really damaged the Angus and the Herefords and things like that. Instead of sticking to, we need feminine female cattle and sheep. So we've all got that a bit weirded out, I think. So I just thought this was good. Jared sent this to me that most 54% of the planet is covered by rangelands, deserts, grasslands, and savannas, and that managing them with pastoralism can be a good thing. I just feel that they're starting. You never saw that when I started in the mid-90s. If you suggested something like that, you were just considered to be a kook. Whereas more and more, like you're only a mild kook now, and that was one of the things that sort of, with my personality or lack of personality, that was one of the reasons. Because I used to say a few trees is good, but we need more grass. And when I said that, everyone else thought I was saying the same thing as them. So that was how I got to that point of saying I hate trees, because it was the only way to get heard. If I said I liked them at all, people thought I was saying the same as them. So when I started saying I hate trees, I certainly got people's attention, but maybe not in a good way. So
I hate trees now too.
Oh, cool.
I tried to pull the strip of tape over a tree that was a small tree, which was just slightly too big than I had the capacity for, and I ended up having to frantically find some way to cut the tape and tie it up before they noticed that I'd and I was muttering and thinking I hate trees too.
I do a similar thing if I'm not concentrating and don't drive straight over the electric wires, the laneway wires, and I'll
Yeah.
get it tangled around the buggy, and then I'm
Yeah.
trying to cut it and it's on and it won't turn off because it's shorting out on the buggy. And you go, oh dear, if only I'd paid attention. You know,
On a
so-
side note, I think I found a pair of gloves that are actually insulating.
Oh, the Kiwi people, the Kiwi tech people used to have gumboots that did that. And
Really?
I was trying them at Warrnambool, and it was on a dairy farm. And I was holding the electric fence in these insulated gumboots, and you could
Mm.
you could just get a little tinkle,
Yeah.
it wasn't enough. And then the dog jumped up on me and earthed me out. The dairy farmer nearly went through the roof. The dog went, it was very funny. And the guy was so apologetic. And friend of mine, Michael, was there. He goes, hey, he's all right. He does that all the time for fun. Oh, it really felt it. So I'm trying to think of ways of expressing what I'm talking about more. So I think that the current model of agriculture, which I've deliberately pointed to the past, is profit through increasing production. So I think that they think that if you increase production, you'll increase profit. So it's sort of like, if you work harder, you'll make more money. It's got some sort of work ethic, in it or something. That whole thinking, I was trying to think this through on the weekend, and then I got all weirded out. I weirded myself out because I got sort of work will set you free. Something popped into my head, and then I was all over the shop going, oh God, I shouldn't say that, and everything like that. But it's sort of something about profit through production, and I'm saying profit through reducing risk and cost. I'm thinking we've got to stop.
too, Graham, people sometimes use working harder as a bit of a badge of honor, don't they? Like, if I'm not working harder, then people might look at me as I'm not doing well as a farmer or a grazier, whereas I guess you just that it's working smarter, isn't it? Like with your reducing risks and costs and
Yeah.
being a bit smart about it. Yeah.
I think we come from like that's, ever since the sort of industrialization era, profit and success is associated with sort of producing more, increasingly getting factories that produce more things so you can sell. Like it's a whole model of how profit is made since the sort of industrialization era. It's all about more
Got Henry
things,
Ford.
output rather than quality.
But then one
Yes.
thing you sometimes see is a business that starts up, they're making a product or they're doing something really well. And so they start expanding out and doing lots of other things. And then it all goes belly up because they've pushed outside of where the sweet spot was.
Yeah,
It's a bit like the Lorax, even though we're not thinking about the trees, but the old Lorax who just wanted to get bigger and bigger up.
Exactly. That's nice. So, we're getting a lot of feedback about the word regenerative from the commercial scale, but even smaller farmers, that they hate it. And I'm thinking I'd like to, and I'm floating the idea that if you said something about profit through reducing risk and costs, I'm not sure you can do that without landscape function. So drop the landscape function, the regenerative, and just say we're just talking about profit through reducing your risk and costs. Or I've been trying to think of how do I capture that so that it doesn't get pinched, because like everyone's regenerative now, even when it's blatantly obvious they're not. And so it's just all got a bit messy and diluted and things like that. So I don't know.
Is it like farming smarter rather than harder?
Yeah.
Or have the land work for you rather than you work for the land? I don't know.
You see, there's a there's a little research farm, looks like a DPI farm, just near the airport, just near the farm in Bairnsdale. And their thing is to unleash your farm's productivity. So they're all about sort of that. So they use that sort of language as well, Kirsten. So, excuse me, you just got to put more in to get more out type stuff. So, and then, productivity doesn't work. I've tried a lot of those things, but if you come up with the solution, could you let me know, or any ideas or tips? That'd be really good. But at the moment, I'm thinking, it's the whole less is more, reduce the risks and costs, leave a buffer in the system. It's just not the way the world's going at the moment. So it's not going back. You've still got to do things differently, because if you don't increase landscape function, so we know that the older style running on manures and all that sort of stuff, those diverse small farms and things, they were failing anyway. They were exhausting people. So how do we get there? How do we not exhaust people? After I've already given my big talk about sort of getting exhausted and stuff. So and we just, somewhere we need a breakthrough on what this actually is and how to design it better and stuff. I only just put this in. I've gone crazy on mind maps. That when I was thinking about profit through increasing production, I ended up with planned and cell grazing, because it just fell out that most of the people that I see that do cell grazing and planned grazing training, they increase their depth, their rainfall, and their market price risk by carrying more animals. They intensify. So I thought that was really interesting, that my mind wants to only talk about this, but what about this? And it's really stark on the WhatsApp group that I'm on, that the drought in Brazil and South America and stuff like that, everyone that's doubled their stocking rate is really struggling. The land's gone back to dust, and they're having to supplement everyone. And I'm saying, I'm having to not say anything, because you can never say anything when people are struggling in a drought, and then as soon as the drought's finished, they forget that it was bad. So I don't know how you're supposed to do that. So did do with the case study farms that we're doing with the drought. I prepared a report for them in June and sent to them and say, this is the forecast. This is what my predictor tool's saying. If you reduce by this, you'll be better off. And everyone agrees that they would have been better off, but they harvested their recovery, some of their landscape function, and they got through without damaging anything too much, whereas other people really have damaged it a lot. Production is a deep belief. This is sort of how to make sense of carbon and emissions on farm that I've signed the Wattle Park up for. But it just starts, we know we must grow more food and fibre as the demand for food steadily increases, which is just not linked to the reality that we grow enough food and fibre for everyone on the world. We just don't distribute it properly. So, and then, the whole story is then about productivity and resilience while maintaining profitability. So most people don't make a profit. So it's just sort of, I just found it all a bit depressing when I read it. And I believe it's an outdated soil science that, they only talk about that you've got to plough the soil, you've got to use nitrogen fertilizers. It's just, I just found that it wasn't very helpful. And it's really interesting that Stephen Hobbs did this project with the Victorian government, with Agriculture Victoria, and they couldn't cope that he'd actually sequestered more carbon than he emitted. At best, you could approach zero emissions, whereas he was actually sequestering more than he emitted. And the woman that I spoke to about it, she remembered Stephen. So she said, we could be talking about the same bloke. And I go, oh, Uncle Stephen. It's because that's what his sort of nephew's calling, of course.
Can I ask
yeah.
a question here,
Sure.
Graham, about that, the methane myth? I seem to recall reading somewhere or seeing something, I don't know whether it was on one of your slides or somewhere else, about how cattle, as well as releasing methane, also release something else or produce something else that then kind of offsets the methane.
Sounds like Walter Yaney's work, Spikey. He's probably the best on that.
Right.
And
Can I grab that name off you again?
yeah, Walter Yaney, Jehne. He's probably he's ex-CSIRO microbiologist and stuff. Claire and I worked with him when he was just starting presenting and things like that. He went on to worldwide fame. So I was very disappointed that I helped him. So
He was going to be our keynote speaker for the conference, Sparky.
yeah, that was, we were going to get Walter down because it's like it's like that instant access to every bit of soil science that's ever been done. It's like talking to David Conway and stuff. But the oxidation of the methane happens where you have canopies and hydroxyl ions. So it's about that. But I'd read Walter's stuff. I'm only sort of giving it secondhand. I've never really studied it. But
yeah, I asked because I think if I think of the two common things that I hear, myths, is this sort of idea that cows are solely responsible for climate change because of their farts, and then the other one is this perception of regenerative grazing as running the chickens after the cows. That's what it constitutes, is 3 months recovery and running the chickens after the cows.
Not an outcome, but just a practice-based thing. I see a lot of this on LinkedIn, and it's all, it's lovely stuff that the people write, and they're great. They're usually incredibly high literates, I find, that I'm competing with, and they have an advantage because I'm not, and they can just write like dreams, and it's so sweet. It's like me trying to say that money and people are nested in this increasing landscape function. Like, that's trying to pretend I'm one of those high literates, the nested word. So like I go, it is not me. So but people like it, so I go, oh well, I'll do it. But yeah, so the methane really is not much of an issue. I when you said about the farting, I always, if I'm in the room that someone says that, I always say that's incorrect. It's actually the burping, not the farting. So just sort of to be annoying, so but like, they're carrying on as they know what they talk about, and they've got the wrong end of the animal. So I get, what else have you got the wrong end of? But anyway, so
it's an interesting point you make, because I was in the paddock and one of my cows just let off an incredible series of farts, and I realized that I'd actually never heard a cow fart before.
It's very good fart.
I can tell you horses fart. Horses fart a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
In rhythm.
Yeah, they play a little tune for you. But like, I just don't understand it. It's sort of like a single focus. It's just ridiculous. So, but we know that we can run sheep and cattle to sequester more carbon than they emit from all emissions on the farm. So the farms that I've worked with, they typically sequester 5 to 7 years worth of total farm emissions, which includes their electricity, their diesel, their enteric methane, all of that sort of stuff. We can do that. It's just so slow we were doing that when I was working in Wellington with Stiper. So the Mosleys out at Cobar had already worked out how to do that then. So that was well and truly, so early 2000s. It just doesn't go anywhere. So yeah, but yeah, Walter would be the person to read or watch one of his talks on that. So I've been chatting. I'll put this in. I'm just trying to. I'm trying to separate this thing, and most of this is mainly for my head, I think, but I just didn't know whether it'd help or not. So, if you've got a problem with animal performance, the production focus looks at younger grass or unrecovered grass, whereas we look at animals and changing the phenotypes on the recovered grass. If you've got annual weeds, they look at herbicide and resowing pastures. We just crowd it out with perennial grasses germinated by high stock density. And I've gone through pasture improvement, paddock numbers, fertility, rainfall risk, erosion. The production focus has buffer strips, whereas we can increase landscape function over the whole land so that you're not getting those nutrients and topsoil ending up in the waterways. So they're really quite stark and quite different, and it's many and varied. But like land fertility, purchase fertilizer, we focus on increasing nutrient cycling. So different, and it needs a bit of work on the words. You can see I've just belted through as I've done it. So
That's Graham, that I really, really like. That's sort of the essence of what I talk to people about. A lot of those basic points. They're all ready to improve performance. They're all ready to run off and buy some grass seed. That's their number one thing. Grass seed, get their soil tested and put some fertilizer on.
Yeah.
And
and
laying it out like that is really good.
Oh, good. Thank you. I sometimes wonder whether it's of any value. I thought was interesting. I was in nutrient densities, sort of a really big thing. So the people that increase landscape function in the States have got really good data now on nutrient density and phytonutrients and stuff. And Alan Williams, who I usually give a bit of a hard time about his grazing, he said that the production people, or the conventional, the only thing they can think of to do that is either gene editing of the plants or bio addition of nutrients through fertilizer. So, adding zinc or adding, whatever through. So that's all their whole thing. Whereas if you increase nutrient cycling and nutrient availability through increasing landscape function. They don't talk too much about diversity for me. It really grates. I could be wrong. I have no problem. But I find that if something grates on me for long enough, then it's usually based on something. I think that diversity of species is an emergent property of increasing landscape function, whereas they actively plant diversity, which is back in my brain, back in that production focus. I don't know how to explain that any better, but I think we need diversity of plants and species, but you've got to let it emerge. You can't force it. If you force it, you actually increase the cost and the risk too much. So everyone's trying to do cover crops and this and that and doing a lot of stuff. And I think that they're stuffing it up, because when Celia and I go and work with people with multi-species pastures and things like that, it ain't going so well. And a lot of the time, they're failing establishment or not lasting very long and all that sort of thing. So, and
Just
I put the claim to
a classic correlation is not the same as causation. Just because you see diversity doesn't mean that it's the cause of the increased function. It's the other way around.
Yeah, I think so. Do Understanding Ag, Gabe Brown, and that they all talk about diversity, diversity, diversity. And I keep thinking, yeah, but and I've tried saying to you, but Gabe, you've already got, some of the highest landscape function cropping land you see. It's got dense litter on it that's decomposing. And then through that he then adds other plants, but he's only adding annuals, so you don't get that extra kick of the perennial grasses, but he's still got the whole thing cycling and nutrient available and things like that. But I suspect from what I've heard from Dwayne Beck and others that they worry that those systems are also leaking nitrate because they overdo the legumes and stuff. So, hey, God, how was that?
With your slides here, Graham, that this latest one and the previous one, would it be worth putting in, without giving you another job, but just or
I
offering
react
to
well
find it?
to another.
Uh,
I react well to another job.
I
So.
know this one. I'm proceeding with caution. A reference to these. Can I look for them? Would there be benefit in that or is it okay just to, I mean, somebody might look at that and say, oh, that's just opinion.
Yeah, true. We know this is reality, don't we?
Yeah.
So rainfall risk, I was thinking of drought stuff, purchased and homegrown fodder. You've got to store more fodder and have more water available. But we buffer with longer recoveries, so an adjusting stocking rate. Which is, so you could reference that to the Wombiana grazing trials. You're saying that sort of thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Put in the
referencing.
comment. Yeah.
Yeah, referencing the trials that prove it.
Yeah.
That would be good. I would like
And
to
then you
read
could,
the evidence.
yeah.
It would give credibility.
I'm not interested in that stuff.
I know you're not.
I'm a 65-year-old white farmer that's tired. It's like people saying to me that oh, it'd be good for your CV. And I go, what?
Yeah.
I'm really not interested in the CV, I tell you.
I think too that with each of those issues, there's probably more than one like production focus and more than one low risk focus. I think there's probably lots of those as well. But so I think you've just given a really good comparison between the two focuses. I reckon it looks really good.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't see we're dealing with that production focus through the groups that we work in and stuff, and we don't see anything new. Sorry?
Can we add a fifth column that says misguided regenerative farmer focus?
Oh.
Would that be a bit too controversial?
Something that I can enjoy, Spike. So
But I guess it depends on what you want to use this for, because you don't want to confuse people.
yeah, but if it hurts someone, I'm in, Kirsten.
Oh, okay, go for it. I had a shit day today, so.
Well, we might have to. We'll have to think about it.
You could have a few versions.
Yeah. God, could you imagine if I trotted that out with some of my crew? Golly, yeah. Anyway, I'll see how we go. Oh, I hope that was okay, everyone. And a couple more to go, so make sure you jump on if you've got any questions, Kate. If you've got any financials or any of that sort of stuff that you want me to do, just jump in and yell, drop me a note, and I'll make sure I cover it. So,
what's the date of the last one? Did you say is there's 3 more after this one, or?
Yes. So that will take us through to the 31st of July.
Oh, giving
That's
a talk.
that's
in
when
Margaret
our
River
first
that
cow
night.
is due.
I'm giving a talk in Margaret River that night. So,
Ah,
well,
well,
sounds like fun, doesn't it?
well, could we push it over to the 7th?
We could.
Have a
We'll
week
work it
off. Yes.
So we'll have the 31st off.
out.
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't thinking of it as a work off, doing a week off doing a presentation in Margaret River, but thank you.
All right.
See you
Thanks,
all.
Thank you,
Graham.
Graham. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.